Power rankings are in. Where do the San Francisco 49ers rank post-draft pre-2025 amongst the other 31 NFL franchises? On today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker with you as always at BD Peacock, at Coach Crocky. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Love our everydayers. Appreciate you hanging out with us. If you are an everydayer, you know what day it is. It's the Tuesday evening on YouTube, but it is the Winky Wednesday pod. And I will introduce our esteemed guest here momentarily to help us break down the power rankings in the NFL. If you're new to the program, though, and if you are not new to the program, tell a friend about Locked On 49ers. And if you are new to the program, welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us. And subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. And now let's bring on today's guest.
Nicholas Winkler, come on down.
Can't believe it.
Nicholas Winkler, my former podcast co-host that predates Locked On 49ers, my former radio colleague, and as he is known in these parts, the voice of the fan, our weekly guest on our Winky Wednesday pods, Nicholas Winkler at Bay Area Wink on Twitter. Nick, how you doing, man? How is the offseason treating you right now?
It's been good. I got recovery time, a lot of injuries that happened during the season that I have some rest now.
Yeah.
I can recover. Yeah, I really put in the work to be ready for OTAs, which are underway, which, we're not getting a lot of word out of OTAs just yet. But I'm excited to start seeing pictures, right? And little video clips and stuff just stuff that really means nothing, but I'm really excited to see all of it.
You know what I love, Croc, is, and we've talked about this, I love the slow motion, zoomed in, spiraling football. That's my favorite video, and I can't wait to see that. Hopefully that comes up in the next 24 hours when guys are on the field now. You get offensive and defensive players on the field at the same time, guys. OTAs are here. It's awesome.
Yeah, the zoomed in and then kind of zoom out, and then it pans to the receiver. That was something with Jimmy Garoppolo we were a little worried about. We didn't know how that ball was going to end up. Not obviously in practice, they weren't going to show that, but in the games where when he kind of threw the ball and you didn't quite know what was on the other side of that panning screen, right, those are kind of scary moments. Not as scary anymore.
Yeah, the quarterback drops back like, I think he's going to take a shot. And you see the ball go in the air, and you're like, what's going to happen when the screen pans? Oh, he's open.
What?
And it hits the ground.
Womp womp.
Maybe some more big plays in the passing game for the San Francisco 49ers this year in the post-Garoppolo era. Obviously not the strong point of the San Francisco 49ers offense for a while, those deep balls. But guys, I have two versions of power rankings that I want to dive into on today's show, and I want your thoughts. One, as voted on here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the Locked On Too Early, Post-Draft, Preseason power rankings, ranking all 32 NFL teams as ranked by our Locked On hosts. And then there is the ESPN Football Power Index that has been released today, and using their deep analytically driven, and not just, hey, this is my opinion, I'm going to vote on it. This is their what their analytics, what their machines spit out about these teams, and there is some points aspect to it, and we'll go through that as well. We'll see which ones we agree with most, which teams we would rank too high, too low. And so, guys, I'm going to bring it on the screen here immediately, and the 49ers rank high, as voted on by the Locked On hosts. Actually, I took it off the screen. I need to put it on the screen. There we go. And so here is the first half, the top 16 teams as ranked by Locked On hosts post-draft. And I'll let everybody know who's not watching on YouTube. I'll read them out so everyone listening can feel these rankings. And to be honest with you, I think the top five should be the top five. It's number one, Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. Number two, the Buffalo Bills. Number three, the Baltimore Ravens. Number four, the Detroit Lions. And number five is the Kansas City Chiefs. I think you could argue about that order, but I think that tier belongs in that tier. Do you guys have any problems with the top five as voted on by our Locked On hosts?
Not at all.
Yeah. So I think that's a clear tier break. Would you change the order of those five? Eagles, Bills, Ravens, Lions, Chiefs.
Yeah, I'd probably put the Chiefs 2 and then move everybody else down 1. I think that's, you look at the Chiefs every year seem to make it to the Super Bowl. So how could you not have them at the top of this list?
Not just that. I mean, they won 15 games last season.
Yeah.
Obviously lost in the Super Bowl, didn't go the way that they wanted. But it's not like they're coming back a worse team.
Right.
Like they have their guys coming back. They have some receivers that are getting healthier, right? Like not having Rashay Rice, I think that was a big deal for their offense. And again, missing him, missed a lot of guys for most of the season that are coming back now. And they still won 15 games. And they still got this guy by the name of Patrick Mahomes. And they still got this great defensive coordinator that's putting a lot of pressure on opposing teams. So why the Chiefs are at 5, hard time really getting down with that. But the rest of it, I'm definitely fine with.
I might put the Lions a little bit higher too. I mean, you're talking about a team that was missing most of their defense last year and still played extremely well and had a great season. So I expect more out of the Lions this year.
You said missing most of their defense. They had 15 defensive players on the IR.
That's crazy. And what did they win? 15 games, 14 games? Like that's nuts.
Yeah.
Especially with the Chiefs, looking at the AFC side of things, I think it should go Eagles, Lions in the NFC. Then we can have some good conversations about the next group of teams. But in the AFC, I don't see how you can put the teams that finish behind the Chiefs every single year ahead of the Chiefs. I don't get it. How is that possible? So it's got to go Chiefs, probably 2. And then I think Bills, Ravens, Lions, they're right in there. And they're really good football teams. And I think this is the top 5. I think it is a tier. And then there's a tier break. And I was
why would that be the case? Like, why would I'm struggling to understand that part? Like, are people just anticipating that Kansas City will just fall? I mean, now again, they still have them as a top 5 team and the number 3 team in the AFC according to these power rankings. But like, how do you come to that conclusion?
You have to talk to your folks.
Your fellow hosts.
Send some texts, send some DMs. I don't know, man. We know all the folks here that voted on these too, so we can ask them. Like, how did they come to this? Look, and this is not for last year. This is for this year. So that's what they're telling us, that they project the Bills and the Ravens to be better than the Chiefs this year to finally do it. One of these years they're going to, guys, right? Like eventually the Bills or the Ravens are going to get past the Chiefs and represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. It feels like it's going to happen. And did they do enough in the draft? Did this offseason change that? I think that's what some people are saying they think happened. Jalen Moore, he's on the Chiefs now, former 49er. He looked good as a starter for the 49ers last year. If he's forced in action, we'll see if Josh Simmons is ready to go. Their first round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs. Guy that Croc and I liked a lot pre-draft. Niners just couldn't make that pick because of the injuries there. I was actually a little surprised, guys, and we'll talk about this next. The San Francisco 49ers, they come up 6th, and I thought this would be the opportunity for everyone to come down on the 49ers and bash the 49ers, and there are some people. There was actually some responses to this, and some hosts even, they're like, what? How did that happen? I didn't vote for the Niners that high. They think the 49ers are ranked entirely too high at number 6. And we'll talk more about the Niners in a second. Number 7, Cincinnati Bengals. Then 8 is the Los Angeles Chargers, followed by Los Angeles Rams at 9 and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 10. Are the San Francisco 49ers too high in the Locked On Podcast Network power rankings at number 6? Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You want to put a little cash on the San Francisco 49ers to win the next Super Bowl? You can do so. Tons of rookie props. And by the way, you can check out the Monday edition of Peacock and Williamson. We go through all of the rookie prop bets that you could bet on at FanDuel. And there's a lot of them. And of course, the NBA playoffs in full swing. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, series-changing moments. And whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, it's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now, because FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live during games. Performance trends, player props, same game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And how could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits. It absolutely would for me, and it can for you. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, guys, San Francisco 49ers showing up at number 6 in the Locked On Power Rankings. A lot of people think this might be too high. Where would you put the San Francisco 49ers going into the 2025 season here, post-draft? Either one you can get a go. Oh, Croc, you're muted.
All right, yeah. For me, I look at a team like the Los Angeles Rams, and I think it's a little tough to have the 49ers over the Rams. I look at a team like the Washington Commanders and how well they play, and it's kind of hard. Now, again, young quarterback, rookie, can he do it again? Maybe the speculation is why you would have the 49ers over them. But my biggest thing with the 49ers, right, in recent years, hell yeah, you have them as a top 3 team, I feel like, every year, especially in the NFC. But this year, man, I just think there's a few questions with the defense. And there are a lot of young guys that they have to lean on. And one thing about the 49ers with how they've played is they've leaned on the defense. So it's like super complimentary football. You want to run the ball, play at a slower pace, but your defense is staying off of the field because they're getting guys 3 and out. And that's how they won a lot of games, really, in the entire Kyle Shanahan tenure. But with a lot of these young guys that they have on defense now, right? Guys that you're going to really have to step up or take that year 2 jump, still kind of some questions with certain things. I have a hard time putting them over certain teams. Now, that's not to say that the 49ers, when it's all said and done, won't be better, but to just project that the defense will be as good, I have a hard time with that. And then to project that the offense can carry the 49ers, which they haven't been great at that either. So I have a hard time having them over some of those teams.
Yeah, there's just so many question marks, right, going into this season that weren't answered. Like I kept waiting for them to draft another offensive tackle, and you just didn't see it, right? And so a lot of young guys on the defensive line, a lot of guys coming off of injuries. Trent Williams is not any younger than he was. Christian McCaffrey, not any younger. These guys, Ayuk, what's going to happen with Ayuk? When's Ayuk going to come back? There's so many questions for the 49ers that I do have a hard time seeing them at 6. Obviously, as a fan, you're like, yeah, 6, that's right. Show some respect. But, I mean, for me, I'd probably swap them and the Bucs. I think that the Bucs are a really solid up-and-coming team. I like what they do in the running game and on defense, which is how you win football games in this league. And like you said, the Commanders, I think they should be higher. I mean, to me, the 49ers at 6 is maybe last year was the exception, right? That people predict that they're going to be back to what we saw years in a row before that. So 6 seems high, but I'd probably still keep them inside the top 10.
Definitely top 10.
Yeah, they definitely deserve to be a top 10 team. And here's the thing is like, so even if you're like, maybe they're a whatever team, and then you look, it's like, okay, well, who's going to rank ahead of them? The Bengals, why? You start to ask yourself this, why would things be different than they ended up last year? And I know the 49ers were a 6-win team. And by the way, I think it's hilarious in the YouTube, or not in the YouTube, but the Twitter comments. Cody Rourke, first of all, host of Locked On Broncos. He's the first one in the comments, and he's like, he doesn't agree with the 49ers ranking. He must have had them ranked a little bit lower. The next one's funny. It's not 49ers related, but it's the Jets fan. He's like, how are the Jets the second worst team? And it's like a Jets fan being shocked that the Jets are high in the power rankings. That makes me laugh a little bit. We'll get to the Jets in the bottom half of the power rankings here. But you start to look at, well, the 49ers aren't a 6-win team if they're healthy, even with a transition team and rookies on defense. If the 49ers are healthy, they're a good football team. Now, I get why you wouldn't put them in the top 5, and that's why I think they don't belong in that tier. Could they jump back into that top tier where they've been with the other top 5 teams in the NFL? Absolutely. Would it shock anybody if they're representing the NFC in the NFC Championship game? Probably listen to this podcast wouldn't shock a lot of people. But it is a transition year. And if the 49ers defense just hits the ground running, Robert Sala's probably not back at defensive coordinator again next year, right? Because he'll have done a phenomenal job with a bunch of young talent on the defensive side of the ball and probably helped out a lot of the veterans that do remain in the starting lineup on the defensive side of the ball. So there's enough questions, and the offense is going to have to carry this thing probably at least early in the season and maybe all season for the San Francisco 49ers. So enough of a transition, but clearly healthy. They're a better football team than they showed last year. And I think they're better than the Rams. Healthy. So I have no problem with them being ahead of the Rams. I do think it's going to be really tight in the NFC West, and I wouldn't fault anybody for having all of the NFC West teams back to back in these rankings. I think it's pretty darn tight. But why would the Bengals be better than they were last year? Right? They got a new defensive coordinator, but their talent hasn't changed, and they didn't go through the injury problems that the 49ers did last year. The Chargers, I could see them being a little bit better, but I wouldn't project them on paper top to bottom to be necessarily better than the 49ers. But the big thing that I see here with these teams, really from 6 all the way down, you could argue about the Cowboys. And Croc, your brother, I'm sure he would say something about the Cowboys being as good or better than the 49ers coming into the year, right? I think the next tier is a massive tier after the top 5. Like, I think there's probably a pretty good argument for almost every team. I mean, the Vikings at 11 is tough because they were such a good team last year, but you change quarterbacks and you have a second-year guy, first-year starter. You don't really know what that's going to look like. So that's a little bit more difficult to project, and I think even more difficult than the 49ers starting some, top 50 draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. But the Niners at 6, the Bengals, the Chargers, the Rams, the Bucks, the Vikings, the Washington Commanders, I think could go up on this list. The Packers, the Broncos, the Texans could go up a little bit on this list as well. You could argue them at number 6. You go to probably the Cowboys. I think you could start to talk about that a little bit as well, and even go into the bottom half of the rankings here. And you look at the Chicago Bears could be on the come up. There is the Atlanta Falcons. You can make the argument with them. And the second, you could go almost to 8, from 6 to 18, and argue that that's an entire tier by itself. And so that's kind of the argument, is I could buy a lot of people being hyped on their football team coming into the year and say, okay, the Niners need to go a little bit down. I think that's going to be the meat of the league, the middle of the league. Probably 10 or 12 teams, I think, could all have a pretty solid argument that they could be the 6th team and belong at the top of that next tier of teams after the top 5.
Yeah, and you always have that surprise team, too, that jumps up from the bottom where you're like, oh, I mean, like a team like the Miami Dolphins, a lot was expected out of them last year. Maybe they hop up into this. There's going to be a lot of fighting, I think, for those spots like 3 through 7 in the playoff seeding. I think there's going to be any one of those teams. You mentioned, we didn't even talk about the Steelers there at 19. I mean, if Aaron Rodgers comes in there and he actually looks good, who knows what could happen with that football team? They always win 10 games. They never have a losing record, so you can't count the Steelers out either. So there's just a lot of teams right now that are right on that edge, right, where they could all of a sudden take the next step and become a playoff team, or even a team that wins a game in the playoffs, or like the Dolphins did last year and just kind of fall off. So I think you're right, Peacock. I think that whole tier there is 19 could all of a sudden become 6.
I totally agree. Trevor Lawrence with a new offensive-minded head coach, they could probably take a step. And to be honest with you, I think maybe the most disrespected teams in the power rankings might be the Seahawks and the Cardinals at 21 and 26. I think the Cardinals are going to be better than the 26th team in the NFL. And I think there's a chance they can compete for a division title this year. A lot has to go right.
The Cardinals. 224. Come on. Ridiculous.
The Cardinals are kind of this weird team because every year you expect them to do better than what ends up being the results of it. But if just as of today, I would have them over really every team that we see on the screen right now that is over them, except for maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers.
The Raiders.
And that's with Pittsburgh signing Aaron Rodgers. If it's Mason Rudolph, which it is right now, then there's no way I'm even having Pittsburgh ahead of them.
Yeah. The Raiders are a little too high at 22, aren't they? Geno Smith, Pete Carroll, Ashton Genty. Is that enough? I think there's just too many new pieces there. Big transition year for the Raiders. Could it come together quickly? I guess. But I don't think their current roster is as good as the Pete Carroll rosters, at the end in Seattle either. So I think they need a little bit more time to get that thing going there.
And with the Raiders too, division they're in, right? You're talking about the Chiefs, the Broncos, right? I mean, the Chargers, all three of them were in the top 10 or 12, right? I mean, that's going to be tough for them to play 6 games against those guys and still be able to pop into the top 22. I think you take the Raiders down. I think you take the Giants down, maybe move the Dolphins and Cardinals up.
And I think for that Jets fan that's upset, I agree that they should be one spot higher at least and put the Saints down at 32. I'd probably put the Saints even behind the Browns. And for those listening in the audio version, I don't think I did the entire rankings from 20. So here's 17, the back half, the last half of the league. It's 17 Chicago Bears, 18 Atlanta Falcons, 19 Pittsburgh Steelers, 20 is the Jacksonville Jaguars, 21 is the Seattle Seahawks, 22 Las Vegas Raiders, 23 New England Patriots, 24 is the New York Giants, 25 is the Miami Dolphins, 26 Arizona Cardinals, 27 is the Indianapolis Colts, 28 the Tennessee Titans, 29 the Carolina Panthers, 30 New Orleans Saints, 31 New York Jets, and the caboose, 32 the Cleveland Browns, as they often have been for my entire life in the Locked On Network power rankings. But guys, next I want to talk ESPN Football Power Index. They use the analytics to tell them, to inform them what the power rankings should be. So it's not just about vibes for the next ranking. We'll see where the 49ers rank in the FPI from ESPN next. Just real quick, guys, before we bring up the next power rankings on the screen, is there a sleeper team that you feel good about in the NFL?
Oh, sleeper team.
So like a team that didn't make the playoffs last year. How are we defining sleeper?
Like, is there like a Commanders or something? Because the Commanders were supposed to be a bad football team starting a rookie quarterback, and it was like, oh, okay, well they're playoff ready immediately. It doesn't have to be that big of a jump, and usually quarterback's a big part of that. I've talked about the Chicago Bears and how that Week 17 matchup, Bears and 49ers, could be a sneaky, interesting matchup this season at the end of the season. I think the Falcons could be one of those. The 17 and 18 Falcons and Bears in those rankings are probably my two. Both are primetime games against the 49ers this year as well. So those could be interesting games. I can't wait to see what those teams look like.
Do the Tampa Bay Buccaneers count? I mean, because
they made the
that is
playoffs.
the team that went to the postseason last year. But, one thing, what Baker Mayfield did a terrific job, right? Like there were some injuries on that team. Mike Evans didn't miss a ton of time, but missed a little bit of time. Chris Godwin, torn ACL, and he missed a lot of time. And Baker had to do a lot of the heavy lifting, had some young running backs that was decent. Berkey Irving, he was decent. But, I think I saw something like there was like no all-pro players on that team, or maybe one. It might have been Tristan Wirfs, maybe. But even then, still able to go to the postseason. So if you're looking at that team like, hey, another year, maybe they're healthier, right? You get a guy like Godwin back. Maybe they added somebody in the draft, and they're probably looking at it like, well, why couldn't we be better than we were last season? So I asked if they count because right here, they're number 14 on the power rankings. So I don't think people are like truly sleeping on them. But I think just in the sense of the way they're talked, I don't know how many NFC versus AFC teams are in that top 14 right there, but at 14, that would put them as a 7th seed. And right. I think they're a team that could kind of sneaky wise be a little bit better than that.
I think I'm going to get killed in the chat for this, guys, but with a healthy Dak Prescott, I could see the Cowboys taking a big step forward. And I don't want to see it. That's the last thing I want to see.
Can't believe it.
Or it seemed like the Panthers. I mean, they came on at the end of last season, and that's a winnable division, I think. We're talking about the Bucks and then maybe the Falcons, but yeah, it pains me to say the Cowboys. I'm sorry, Croc. I hope your brother's not listening to this one.
He's not listening, and that's not as bad as what Peacock and I have done. I think we predicted one time they'd go to like the NFC Championship game or Super Bowl or something like that, and it just won't happen. They're just I don't know if it's the coaching. I don't know, and we'll see how the new coach that they just hired. I believe he was the offensive coordinator last year. We'll see, but that's a very weird team.
I don't remember that, Croc. I think you're making that up.
They continue to underachieve. And you look at them and it feels like a lot of times it's a team that should be better. We'll see what they do. They had Rico Dowdle last year playing running back, and he was okay. They had to bring back old, Zeke Elliott. Now they drafted the running back out of Texas. We'll see if he can make anything happen, but I don't have any expectations for
What round was the Jaden Blue? That was late, right? 6th round or something like that.
Was it that far down?
I think it was pretty late, 5th round maybe. I think it was pretty late, day 3. He fell a little bit. I think Travis Etienne could be on the trade market for the Jaguars. That'd be a nice fit for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey,
5th round for Blue.
Okay. This isn't Dallas Cowboys podcast. This is a 49ers podcast. Looking at the FPI, the Football Power Index, according to ESPN, they have the San Francisco 49ers at 11, one spot behind the Los Angeles Rams. And this is an interesting one. So what ESPN does with the FPI is there's a point structure to it. So the Eagles are plus 5.5, which means that they would win on average by 5.5 points versus a league average team at a neutral site. And so they do like 10,000 game simulations, and that's how they come up with the number. And so the Eagles are 1, the Chiefs are 2, 5.4. So very close there with the Philadelphia Eagles at the top of those power index rankings. The 49ers at 11 are plus 1.3. So they would win by 1.3 points on average against a league average team on a neutral site. So pretty middle of the road there for the San Francisco 49ers. And it looks like there's 17 of the 32 teams that are on the plus side of that thing. And it's the 17 is the Steelers and 18 is the Cowboys. So Steelers are plus 0.1 and the Cowboys are negative 0.3 there. So that's kind of the break between what they think is the league average teams in the NFL. 11, I buy that too for the San Francisco 49ers, right? So I think 6, I think 11. If you told me they're in the top 5, I would buy that. Can you see a path to another 6-win team for the San Francisco 49ers, guys? Because that's kind of the other thing is everyone expects, even if you're kind of down on the Niners, you expect a little bit of a bounce back. Like they're not going to be a 6-win team again, right? But if the 49ers are relying already on more unknowns than they had coming into last year, then they wouldn't even need as many injuries to start to derail what they're doing this season too, right? Like, are they on a more slippery slope because of how they're built in a little bit of a transition year, especially on defense?
Well, I think if you just have the offensive players just a little healthier, and I mean, you miss Christian McCaffrey. I think that's a big part of the offense. You miss guys like Trent Williams, who's protecting the blind side. Brandon Ayuk, he goes down close to midseason. So, you have some of those guys back, and it's not to say that everybody's going to be 100% healthy throughout the season, but I think just that offense alone is going to add a couple wins. Now, you need to, George Kittle to stay healthy for an entire season. Can he do that, right? So there are some question marks, especially with kind of the age of some of these guys and the positions that they play and the way that they play. But if they're relatively healthy on offense and you still have Juwan Jennings and Pierce Hall and those guys, I expect them to, at the very least, be 3 wins better than they were last year.
Yeah, when you look at
a young defense.
Yeah, and a young defense, but a veteran coach coming back in, right, wanting to run his scheme, and there's been a lot of success with that defensive scheme, especially in the red and gold. So you hope that Salah can bring a couple of wins there. And I mean, if you look at this, there's pretty much any team on this list could be a 6-win team, right? If they go through some bad luck, ball bounces in funny directions. It's an oblong ball, and injuries can happen at the worst possible times. And this list looks a lot more accurate than the last one that we looked at when it comes to how I think the season stacks up going in. Obviously, everything changes once you start playing football. But, yeah, I'd put the Niners right around 10, 11, 12, right around there. And again, they got the Chiefs up near the top and the Lions near the top. And, yeah, this is a pretty solid list here. I'm in agreement.
I do worry about the Washington Commanders becoming like just a big-time NFC juggernaut, potentially, right? Or it could be a little bit of what we saw with the Texans last year, where little sophomore slumpish, just not quite ready. And as I always say about quarterbacks, the development path isn't linear. my co-host at Peacock and Williamson always brings up the plexiglass principle, which means if you are a team that takes a huge leap one year, you're very likely to kind of come back down a little bit and not just keep leaping in that regard. But also on that same token, I think one of the sleeper teams that I haven't mentioned yet, who are also on the 49ers schedule, I believe, right, is the Houston Texans. I wonder if the Houston Texans could take that big step as well in the AFC and start to get talked about closer to the Bills and the Ravens than where they are currently, which is just behind the Niners at 13 here in the ESPN FPI. I think there's a lot of talent there, and I do believe in D'Amico Ryans to have that thing humming and going in the right direction. I think C.J. Stroud's a really good football player too.
That doesn't count as a sleeper, Peacock. They won a playoff game last year.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're not sleeper, but based on these rankings, I'm like, okay, like I'd probably put the Texans ahead of the Niners before I'd put the Rams ahead of the Niners. How I view these teams right now, top to bottom, even though the Rams are not a team you should be taking lightly either, just because they got McVay and Stafford.
You said Texans. The Texans won the playoff game last year?
Yeah, didn't they win their first round game? Pretty sure. Against the Chargers?
Huh.
I'm gonna look it up.
Didn't they cancel the playoffs last year? I don't remember that.
That's very impressive because that is a team too that they play some good ball on the defensive side of the ball, but man, Stephon Diggs out with an ACL. They lost Tank Dell. He was out like dislocated knee or whatever happened with him. Kind of had to rely heavily on Nico Collins and Joe Mixon.
They beat the Chargers 32-12.
Wow.
There you go. Chargers too. Could Chargers be that team?
Yeah.
I feel like we're just saying that every year.
I know. For the last 2 decades, it's been like, oh, the Chargers look good. Yeah, all right.
ESPN does like the Chargers though. They're 8, and the Locked On Network had them right around that same spot, 7 or 8, right? So there you go. Actually, I think both had them at 8, the Chargers. So maybe
I think there'll be a well-coached team, Harbaugh, and I do like quarterback, and I think Herbert's that playoff game I think was terrible. So that's kind of like the last memory everyone has, but.
I think a lot of Niner fans out there are, also kind of rooting for the Chargers and rooting for the Texans, as long as they're not playing the Niners, because you want those Niners coaches to succeed.
Yeah. There's some good feelings still for Jim Harbaugh and D'Amico Ryans.
That's weird. Dolphins a little bit too, right?
No doubt. Wink, thanks for joining us once again. I want all the listeners out there to let us know what you think. Where are the 49ers? Where should they realistically be ranked in the power rankings here post-draft now, as we've seen these rosters constructed heading into 2025? Let us know at BD Peacock, at Coach Crocky, as he is now known on the socials, and at Bay Area Wink. And make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. And Croc and I back tomorrow, right here, Locked On 49ers.
We do ask that you dump your trash on the way out.